The morning of my mother-in-law's retirement party, I was on my knees in the kitchen at 6 a.m., hand piping rosettes onto a 3-tier lemon cake I'd been baking since Thursday. My husband was asleep upstairs. His mother was asleep in our guest room. His sister was asleep on our pull-out couch. I had made them all breakfast the day before, and the day before that, and I had laundered their towels and restocked the guest bathroom with the fancy soap my mother-in-law liked, the French milled kind from the little boutique on Bloor Street that costs $19 a bar. I had bought 3 bars. I did not buy any for myself. I want you to understand something before I tell you what happened. I was not a pushover. I had a master's degree in accounting. I managed the books for a mid-sized construction company in Mississauga, and I was very, very good at it. I knew how to read a spreadsheet the way some people read a novel, fast, with full comprehension, catching every error. The irony of what happened to me financially is not lost on me, not even a little. My name is not important. What's important is that I had been with my husband, I'll call him my husband because that's what he was, legally for 6 years, since I was 26. We met at a work function. He was charming and warm, and he made me feel, for the first time in my adult life, like someone was genuinely paying attention to me. His family was loud and close-knit in the way that seemed beautiful from the outside. Sunday dinners, matching Christmas pajamas, group texts that were always pinging. I wanted in. I worked hard to get in. What I did not realize, not for a long time, was that there was a difference between being used by a family and being welcomed into one. And by the time I understood the difference, I had already spent 4 years being the former while believing I was the latter. My mother-in-law. I'll call her that because she was, and because it still stings to say it, retired in June from 31 years as a school administrator in Burlington. It was a big deal. Her colleagues adored her. Her children worshipped her. And when my husband mentioned, casually, over dinner in February, that the family wanted to do something special, I said yes before he even finished the sentence. We could do a proper party, I said. Venue, catering, the works, he smiled. He said that sounded wonderful. He said his mother would love that. What he did not say, and what I should have asked but didn't, because I was still operating under the delusion that we were a team, was who exactly would be doing the planning and who would be paying for it. The answer, as it turned out, was me. On both counts. I booked the Harbour Banquet and Conference Centre in Oakville. I negotiated the room rate, confirmed the catering package, a sit-down dinner for 42, with a vegetarian option and a nut-free dessert table because my husband's cousin had an allergy. I hired a photographer. I ordered custom centerpieces from a florist on Lakeshore. I designed the invitations on Canva at 11 at night, after I'd already worked a full day. I drove 40 minutes in February sleet to pick up the deposit check because my husband forgot. The total came to just over $11,000. I put it on the joint credit card. I did not complain. I want to be clear about that. I was proud of what I was building. I thought I was doing something good for the people I loved. What I did not know, what I would not find out until much later, was that during those same months, while I was losing sleep over seating charts and dietary restrictions, my husband had been quietly moving money. Not a lot at first. A few hundred here, transferred to an account I didn't have access to. Then more again. Our joint savings account, which had just over $40,000 in it when the year began, had dropped to under 12 by the time spring arrived. I didn't notice right away because I trusted him. I managed other people's money with obsessive precision. My own finances I managed with love. And love, I have learned, is not a reliable accounting method. The party was on a Saturday in late June. The weather was genuinely beautiful. One of those Ontario June evenings where the air is warm and the light goes golden around 7 and everything looks like it was lit by someone who cares. The venue looked stunning. The flowers were perfect. The caterers were professional and attentive. I had arranged for a slideshow of photos spanning my mother-in-law's entire career, and I had personally called 11 of her former colleagues to gather stories and well wishes that I'd had printed and bound into a little keepsake book. I wore a green wrap dress. I had my hair done. I felt, getting out of the car in that parking lot, like someone who had made something beautiful and was about to share it. We arrived together, my husband and I. His sister and her boyfriend were already inside. His parents came in a few minutes later. Cousins trickled in. Old family friends? Former colleagues. 42 people filling up the room I had booked, eating the food I had ordered, looking at the flowers I had chosen, flipping through the book I had made. I floated. I helped the caterers. I fixed a centerpiece that had listed to one side. I made sure my mother-in-law had a full glass of Pinot Gris, her favourite, which I had specifically asked the venue to stock. Around 7:30, they called everyone to their seats for dinner. I looked at the seating chart I had made, the same one I'd revised 4 times over the past 3 months, and I found my name. Table 3, between my husband and his aunt. I walked to table 3. My seat was not there. I mean this literally. The chair was gone. There were 8 chairs around the table instead of 9, 8 place settings, 8 glasses, 8 little folded name cards. My name card was not among them. The card that should have been between my husband and his aunt simply did not exist. I stood there for a moment. My husband was already seated. He looked up at me. "Oh," he said. He looked at his sister across the table. She looked back at him. "Did someone miscalculate?" his aunt asked. And my mother-in-law, the woman whose party I had spent 4 months building, whose flowers I had obsessed over, whose former colleagues I had telephoned, she looked at me from her seat at the head of the room and said, with a small, tight smile, "There might be a spot at the bar." Someone laughed. I don't know who. Maybe more than one person. I stood in the room I had booked, in front of the flowers I had ordered, and I looked at my husband, and he was studying his napkin. I did not cry. I want you to know that. I did not raise my voice. I did not make a scene at my mother-in-law's retirement party, which I had planned and paid for, in the venue I had negotiated, with the caterers I had hired. I picked up my clutch from the back of the nearest chair. I smiled. A real smile, actually, the kind that surprises you. And I said, quietly enough that only the people at table 3 could hear, "You know what? I think you're right. I don't think I belong here." I walked out through the front entrance. The evening air hit me and I breathed it in, and I kept walking until I reached my car, which was parked in the 3rd row, and I sat in the driver's seat with my hands in my lap, and I thought, with remarkable clarity, okay, now I know. I want to explain what happened next, because people always assume revenge is about anger. They imagine someone furious acting impulsively. That's not what this was. What this was accounting. I sat in my car for approximately 11 minutes. Then I took out my phone and I started making calls. The first call was to the venue coordinator, a woman named Sandra, who had been an absolute professional throughout the entire planning process. I told her there had been a family emergency and I needed to speak with her privately. She came outside. I explained in about 90 seconds that I was the one who had booked this event, I was the one whose credit card was on file, and I was the one who would be settling the final bill. I also told her that I would be removing my card from that file tonight, before the event concluded, and that any outstanding balance would need to be collected from another party. Sandra, to her credit, was unflappable. She confirmed the remaining balance, owing just over $3,100, covering the bar tab and final catering fees, and she said she would need a new card on file before the evening ended. I thanked her. I gave her my husband's personal card number, which I had memorized years ago the way you memorize the things that belong to your life. I said I'd been asked to update the card on file and to please process the final charges there. She updated the file. The second call was to the photographer. He was a freelancer named... Actually, his name doesn't matter. What matters is that I had paid his deposit and the contract was in my name. I told him I needed the full gallery sent only to my personal email, not to the shared family address I'd originally listed as secondary. He confirmed. I thanked him. The third call was to my bank. This is where it gets important. I had that week finally looked carefully at the joint savings account, really looked, and I had discovered what I told you about earlier, the transfers, the slow and steady erosion of what we had built. $40,000 down to 11,900. I had made a quiet appointment with my bank manager for the previous Wednesday. I had brought the records, she had walked me through my options, and that evening, sitting in the parking lot of the Harbour Banquet and Conference Centre in Oakville, Ontario, I did what she and I had already discussed. I moved the remaining balance, every cent of what was left in the joint account, into a new individual account that only I could access. This was fully legal. My lawyer, whom I had also seen that week, yes, I had been busy, had confirmed that I had every right to do so as a joint account holder, particularly given the evidence I had of prior unauthorized transfers. Then I called my sister, who lived 20 minutes away, and I asked her to come get me. Not because I couldn't drive, because I didn't want to be alone, and because she is the one person in the world who has never made me feel like I had to earn my seat at the table. She arrived in 17 minutes. She brought me a coffee from the Tim Hortons on the way. Double, exactly right. And she didn't say much. She just drove. I found out what happened inside partly from the venue staff, who were professional but human, and partly from my husband's cousin, who texted me 3 days later with what I could tell was genuine discomfort and guilt. When the evening wound down and the family went to settle the bill, they discovered that my card was no longer on file. My husband's card was. The remaining balance, 3,100 and change, plus the bar tab, which had grown, was charged to him. He had not budgeted for this. He did not have the available credit. There was a conversation with the venue manager. There were phone calls. There was, apparently, a fairly uncomfortable 20 minutes in the lobby where my husband and his sister and his mother stood trying to sort it out while the caterers waited to be dismissed and the photographer packed up his gear. The centerpieces, by the way, were not returnable. His personal card eventually went through, barely, but the transaction triggered an overdraft notification on another account he had, which led to a conversation with his bank, which led to a flag on the account he had been quietly transferring money into, which he had not told me about because he had been planning to leave. Not just the marriage, he had been planning, I eventually learned from my lawyer, to take what he could and go. The account he'd been building up was his exit fund. What he had not accounted for, and I say this with a satisfaction I am not ashamed of, was that I am an accountant. I find errors for a living. I had simply been too in love to look. The divorce took 14 months. My lawyer was excellent. The financial evidence I had gathered, the transfer records, the timeline, the undisclosed account, was enough to ensure a settlement that reflected what I had actually contributed to our life together. The $11,000 I had spent on that party was addressed in the settlement. So was the missing money from the joint account. My husband had retained his own lawyer, who is not, in my professional opinion, as thorough. I kept the photos from the party. Not out of sentimentality. I am well past that, but because there is a specific photo the photographer sent me from around 7:15 before I walked to table 3, I am standing near the centerpiece I fussed over in my green dress with a glass of wine, and I look genuinely happy. Not performing happy. Actually happy. I keep it because it reminds me that I was good to those people. I gave what I had, my time and my skill and my care, and I did not give it badly. What they chose to do with it is not a reflection of me. My mother-in-law, to my knowledge, never acknowledged what happened that night. Not a phone call, not a text, nothing. Her son left the marriage having taken what he could and been caught, and she has not, in 14 months, said a single word to me. The keepsake book I made her, the one with the handwritten notes from her former colleagues, the photos spanning 3 decades of her career. I know she kept it, because her former colleague told me she'd seen it on the bookshelf in the living room. I made that. That was mine, and she kept it without a word. I think about that sometimes. I think about what it means to make something beautiful for people who see you as furniture, and I think about the fact that I am 33 years old, and I have a job I am very good at, and a sister who brings me coffee without being asked, and a lawyer who is aggressive in the best possible way, and an apartment in Hamilton with a balcony where I can sit on summer evenings and watch the light go golden over the escarpment. And I think I found my seat. It just wasn't at that table. I've thought a lot about the photograph, the one taken at 7:15 before I walked to table 3. I'm standing near the centerpiece I spent 2 evenings fussing over in my green dress with a glass of wine, and I look genuinely happy. Not the kind of happy you perform for a camera. The real kind. The kind that comes from having made something you're proud of and being about to share it with people you love. I didn't know, in that moment, that the chair was already gone. What I've come to understand is that the chair being gone wasn't an accident. It was a conclusion that had been forming for years, quietly, in the way that slow things form, the way rust forms, or debt, or resentment. I had been so busy building something beautiful for other people that I had not looked carefully at what was being taken from me at the same time. That's not a character flaw, but it is something worth sitting with. I think about what it actually took to walk out of that room, not dramatically, not loudly, just out. I've had people ask me, since everything came out, if I regret not saying more, not making a scene, laying it all out in front of 42 people, and honestly, no, not even a little. Because what I did that evening required something harder than anger. It required knowing, with real clarity, what I was worth, and being willing to act on that knowledge even when every room I was standing in was telling me something different. The financial piece, the transfers, the hidden account, the exit fund my husband had been quietly building. That didn't happen because he was especially clever. It happened because I had stopped paying attention to my own life. I managed other people's numbers with precision and care. My own I managed with trust. And trust, extended without any accountability behind it, isn't generosity. It's a gap in the ledger. I know that now. But here's the thing about gaps in a ledger. They can be found. They can be corrected. The records existed. The timeline was clear. I had every receipt, every transfer notification, every statement going back 3 years. The same discipline I brought to my work. The patience, the precision, the refusal to accept a number that doesn't add up, I finally brought to my own situation, and it held up. In a lawyer's office, across a settlement table, it held up completely. My sister brought me a double-double that night without being asked. She didn't tell me what to do or how to feel. She just drove. That's the kind of person who has always seen me clearly, not as useful, not as capable, not as the one who handles things, just as hers, as someone worth showing up for at 11 o'clock on a Saturday with no explanation required. I think what the whole thing taught me, not as a lesson with a tidy bow on it, but as something I now carry in my body the way you carry something you've actually lived, is that the way you treat yourself sets the floor for how others treat you, not the ceiling. The floor. I had let my floor drop very low, one small compromise at a time, because I believed that if I gave enough, eventually the people I loved would see me the way my sister always had. They didn't, and that's okay, because I finally do. The apartment in Hamilton has good light in the mornings. I drink my coffee on the balcony and watch the escarpment change with the season. It's a quiet life, and it's entirely mine, and I built it the same way I build everything, carefully, with full attention, making sure every number adds up. This time, I'm one of them.